God's Old Testament word, Ecclesiastes 4:9-12. The picture of a dependable friend. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity to the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if two lie together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. The gospel reading is from Luke 5:18 to 20, and then 25 to 26. Big problems in life are solved by friendship and teamwork. Some men came carrying a paralytic on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and lowered him on a mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. Immediately, he stood up in front of them, took what he had been laying on, and went home praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, "We have seen remarkable things today."
Well, I hope that over the last number of weeks you've enjoyed this series where we've talked about how the greatest investments that we make are not financial, but they're always relational. Up to this point, we've learned again and again how the more we're at one with Christ, the more we're going to be at one with each other in our homes, in our families. And today we want to talk about how can we extend that circle also out into our potential and already friendships. Now think about the world in which we live. There's a lot of people in America, a lot of Christians in America that really struggle with friendships. How do we maintain them? How do we form them? How can they become the relationships that grow deeper and deeper? And we know the reasons why a lot of people decide to have this isolation syndrome. It's because they know that their lives are hectic and busy. We always have to get from here to there. But in addition to that, each of us know that if we want healthy friendships, they require a lot of us. They take time. They require sacrifice. And so in America, unfortunately, the problem is a lot of people don't want to expend that extra efforts. And so instead, we see people online where they don't have to be vulnerable. They don't really have to open themselves up as much. And so instead of people that are, again, opening their hearts, sharing their thoughts and feelings with others, being willing to take the mask off, we see more and more people staying at an arm's length. How about you? I'm going to ask a strange question, especially for guys. But you know, as we grow older, one of the weirdest things is, how many of you know, without a doubt, that if you excluded all your family members, that you'd have enough guys who are close friends to carry your casket at your funeral? Isn't that a strange thought? But there's a lot of guys that wouldn't, because we don't invest in our relationships and friendships. You know, along with that, I want you to think about just in terms of your friendships today. How many are they? How deep are they? Do you know the difference between acquaintances and deep friends? You know how you find out? Get into trouble. Have some crisis. Have some problem. Here's how you're going to determine the difference between an acquaintance and a friend. Tonight, at 2 o'clock in the morning, call somebody, anybody. Okay? You're going to find out who's a friend and who's not pretty quick. If they're an acquaintance, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, "What's the problem?" And then they're going to consider in their mind, should I go or should I not? If they're a friend, you know what they're going to say when you share your need to them? They're going to say, "Hey, where are you at?" And they're going to get dressed and they're going to be out the door in 5 minutes. Notice what God's word has to say about this. How many deep friends do you have? Proverbs 17, verse 17, written by King Solomon, who is the second smartest guy that ever lived on this earth next to Jesus. He said, "A friend loves at all times," and especially the second part, "A brother is born for adversity." In the church, remember in our confession earlier, we talked about how that issue gets multiplied because, again, when we walk down the aisle, we look around and we're like, how come everybody's normal here except me? And then we get into crisis, and we're like, you know what? I don't think I really want to open up, and I don't really want to share with others in the church that I'm struggling because everybody in the church should always have it always together. And so the very person that's sitting next to you year after year after year, in a moment when there's pain or there's hurt or there's relationship issues, many of those individuals will choose to drift away rather than to seek support and assistance. And again, our mind is boggled by that. How can that be? So today, let's spend some time talking about how can we take relationships and friendships and cause them to be multiplied and grow in their depth. Well, number one, how do we grow in our friendships? First of all, be willing to serve rather than to be served. Remember the second lesson that we just heard Lori read for us from Luke chapter 5. We're told that there are 4 friends and their buddy is paralyzed. Now take a step back and consider that, because you know what? You and I, if we look around, will see that same scenario again and again and again. There's all kinds of people that are paralyzed. Maybe not physically, but certainly spiritually. And a lot of times those individuals are us. There's people that are paralyzed when it comes to emotions, finances, relationships, and spiritually. And we've all hit that wall. There are times when it just seems like we're spinning our wheels, we're going through the motions, we're in a funk, and then all of a sudden, we're like, well, why should I even try? Because it just seems like we're not getting anywhere. Who do you know in your life right now that's burdened, weary? Who are those individuals in your workplace, your school when you head back into fall? Who are those people in your neighborhood? Now, let me share this story to kind of give us an example. There's this guy that's sitting at home, and he's looking out the window across the street, and his neighbor all day long is trying to work on this house project, home improvements. And it's just not working. And as the guy looks out the window, you can tell this guy's getting frustrated and overwhelmed. So finally, he goes into his garage, and he grabs all of these amazing tools. And he walks across the street, and he helps this guy finish the project, and they work on it all day. And when it's done, the guy says to his neighbor, he says, "What do you normally make with all those cool tools that you have?" You know how the guy responded? He said, "Mostly friends." Today, I want you to think about that. Who across the street, across the room in your workplace, who in that level of associates do you want to make friends with that are deep, that are sincere and real? God says to us simply, have his eyes for that. So again, if my next door neighbor is doing a housing project or some home improvement thing, I suppose I could grab my Fisher-Price tool set and my limited handyman skills and try to help, but I'm going to probably create more enemies than friends. But all of us know, is your next door neighbor have little kids and the parents are like overwhelmed? Make it specific. Don't go over and knock on their door and say, "Hey, sometime this summer, if you want, I'd be willing to watch your kids." Be specific. Bang on the door and say, "You know what? Next Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I've got some openings. I'd love to watch your kids to give you a break." What day will work better for you? Be specific. Say, "Lord, give me many opportunities to creatively think of ways to serve." Secondly, how do you deepen relationships and friendships? Well, not only your willingness to serve, but secondly, who do you know that you can take right to the very presence of the living Jesus? Who can you invite? Now, whenever you and I read through the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, if you would ever make a mental note of how many times people are bringing others to Jesus, it's astounding. Take a look at 3 examples here real quick. First of all, from Matthew chapter 4. News about Jesus spread as far as Syria, and people soon began bringing to him all who were sick. And whatever that sickness or disease, or if they were demon-possessed or epileptic or paralyzed, he healed them All because people brought people to Jesus. Take a look at Mark chapter 1. That evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus the sick, all the sick and demon-possessed. Matthew chapter 19. One day some parents brought their children to Jesus so he could lay his hands on them and pray for them. And so we see all these people bringing others to the very presence of Jesus because they know that he's always the biggest solution to every one of life's big problems. It was non-negotiable. And that's why when we heard earlier from Luke chapter 5, isn't this the coolest story? There's this guy that's paralyzed. And so every day, the only way anything was going to happen in his life is if people noticed him and if people served him. So he's got these 4 buddies that obviously were taking care of him, watching out for him. And one day they hear, hey, Jesus is in the area. So they grab onto this guy's mat and lift him up. And I don't know how far they had to walk, but you know it couldn't have been easy. And they're walking and they're traveling and they're trudging along. And they finally get to the place. And there's this monstrous crowd. And does God's word say at that point, well, because we can't get in, we might as well get home. We might as well give up. Sorry, pal. We're late. You're going to be paralyzed forever. Let's go home. Tough for you. So sad. Too bad. But did your version say that in the Bible, by the way? Here's these 4 guys. There's this monstrous crowd. Nobody can get in. And you know what they do? All of a sudden, when there's no solution, one of the guys in the group starts brainstorming. At least one, maybe all 4 did. And remember what he comes up with? He's like,